What if Robert Baratheon, the great boulder of a king, arrived at Winterfell with more than one proposition folded inside his fist? What if the man who laughed too loudly and drank too deeply had, for once, thought several moves ahead? What if the offer he carried north was not simply a title, not simply the hand's pin gleaming cold in its box, but something older and more binding, a chain of blood, of name, of marriage? The column arrives as columns always do when kings travel. Too large, too loud, too slow, churning the king's road into mud and announcing itself for miles before the first banner crests the horizon. Robert rides at the front of it all, broader than memory, his black hair shot through now with threads of gray, his laugh rolling ahead of him like weather. He has not seen Ned Stark in years. He intends to fix that. He intends to fix several things. Ned stands in the yard with his family arranged around him, like a lord ought to arrange them, sons in a line, daughters beside their mother, the household observing from the walls. Jon Snow stands slightly apart, as Jon Snow always stands, occupying that precise distance from belonging that has defined his entire life. He is 14 now, lean and watchful, his gray Stark eyes steady on the approaching riders. He does not know what the king carries. He does not know that his name is about to change shape. Robert dismounts before the horse fully stops. He always did. He pulls Ned into an embrace that is also a collision, clapping him on the back hard enough to move stone, and the laugh comes enormous and genuine, filling the cold northern air. He looks at the Stark children one by one with the appraising eye of a man who has spent 15 years measuring people for what they might be worth. When his gaze reaches Jon, it lingers. It is that lingering that tells Ned everything. They speak first of nothing, of the road, of the cold, of the relative merits of southern wine against northern ale. They speak of the dead, because old soldiers always do, circling back to the names that anchor them. They eat and they drink, and they let the evening carry them through pleasantries that are not, strictly speaking, pleasant. Because both men understand that something heavier is waiting in the room and will not be put off much longer. Robert raises it in the solar, the fire built high, the door shut. He does not circle it. Robert Baratheon was never a man for circles. He states the position directly, the way a siege engine states its position, by pointing at the wall and releasing. He wants Ned as hand. He has always wanted Ned as hand. Jon Arryn is dead, and the small council is a nest of vipers. And there is no man in the Seven Kingdoms he trusts the way he trusts the man standing across from him now. This much Ned already knew was coming. This much he had prepared himself to refuse. Then Robert continues, and the refusal dies somewhere between Ned's throat and his lips. A betrothal, Robert says, Jon Snow and Sansa Stark. He frames it with the easy confidence of a man who has already decided the frame is sound. He speaks of legitimization, not full legitimization, not a royal decree naming Jon Baratheon or Stark, but a social binding, a betrothal that carries its own weight, that says to the watching realm, this boy is claimed, this boy has a place, this boy is not a question to be answered in someone else's time. He speaks of alliance. He speaks of uniting the blood of Winterfell in a way that cannot be undone. He does not speak of Lyanna. He does not finish the sentence that would require it. He does not need to. Ned stands very still. This is what Ned Stark does when the world requires him to fall apart. He goes still. He lets nothing reach his face. He holds every calculation behind his eyes where Robert cannot see it, and he calculates quickly, because there is no time now for anything slower than quick. Jon's parentage is a secret that has survived 14 years on the strength of Ned's silence alone. A betrothal to Sansa does not expose that secret. A betrothal to Sansa, if anything, buries it deeper, layers Stark over Stark, makes Jon more northern, more grounded, less a question that might drift south and find dangerous answers. Robert is offering a solution to a problem Robert does not know exists. Ned consents. The word is quiet. The word costs him something he cannot name. Across the castle, in the chambers she shares with her sister, Sansa Stark is sitting very straight on the edge of her bed while her mother speaks. Catelyn Tully did not choose her own marriage either, and she knows the difference between a closed door and a locked one. The betrothal, she tells her daughter carefully, is not a wedding. Not yet. There is time yet for patience, and patience, in the right hands, is its own kind of power. Sansa listens. Her hands are folded in her lap. Her face is composed and correct. Her eyes are somewhere else entirely. The morning the Stark party rides out of Winterfell, the sky is the color of old iron. There's frost on the stones. There's frost on the banners. The horses breathe in visible clouds, and the yard is full of controlled motion. Servants loading carts, guards checking saddle straps, children watching from the edges of things, because children always watch from the edges of things. It is the kind of morning that fixes itself in memory, whether you want it to or not. Jon Snow stands at the margin of it all and watches his name being moved to a different column on a ledger he cannot see. Ward of Robert Baratheon. The title has been given to him quietly, in the way that significant things in Winterfell are always given. Without ceremony, almost without words, as though the weight of the thing speaks loudly enough on its own. Lord Stark had delivered it to him the night before, standing at the window of his solar with his back half turned, his voice measured and careful. Jon had stood very still and listened to the shape of what was being offered. Not a bastard left behind, not a boy dispatched to the wall. A ward. A ward placed within the king's own traveling party, which means Jon rides south, not as an afterthought, but as something the king has chosen to keep close. The political calculation behind it is not lost on him. Jon Snow is 17 and has spent his entire life learning to read rooms that were not designed to include him. He does not feel gratitude exactly. He feels the particular alertness of a man who understands that an opportunity and a trap can occupy the same space simultaneously. Robb finds him before the horses move. This is inevitable. Robb has never been good at leaving things unsaid, which is both his greatest quality and, Jon suspects, the thing most likely to cause him difficulty in the years ahead. He comes across the yard without ceremony, without the performance of a lord's son seeing off a ward. And when he reaches Jon, he grips his arm the way he has since they were boys. The kind of grip that means, I am not finished with you yet. King's Landing, Robb says, and there is an entire volume of meaning compressed into those two words, none of it flattering to King's Landing. Jon meets his eyes. I know. You don't know all of it. Robb's jaw is set. He speaks low, beneath the general noise of departure. Father knows some of it, but the court down there, the people around the king. He stops. He does not finish the sentence. He does not need to. They have both heard Maester Luwin's histories. They have both sat in the great hall while men who rode south for glory came back older and stranger, or did not come back at all. Watch yourself with Lannister men especially. Robb says finally. Don't drink more than you can carry. Don't say anything you're not willing to stand behind in full daylight. You sound like your father, Jon says, and the words come out with more warmth than he intends. Robb exhales. Something shifts in his expression. Something complicated that does not have a simple name. There's no man alive I trust more than you, he says. That has not changed. Whatever this arrangement is, whatever it makes you on paper, none of that changes what I know of you. Do you understand? Jon understands. The words land somewhere deep and stay there. He will carry them south like a stone in his pocket, a weight that grounds him. They clasp hands once, briefly, and without theater, and then Robb steps back and becomes Lord Stark's heir again. And Jon turns and becomes something he is still learning to pronounce. The first day of riding south, Jon finds himself positioned near the middle of the column, which is where wards are positioned, neither at the vanguard nor the rear, occupying the careful middle distance of people whose status is acknowledged but not yet fully defined. Sansa rides ahead of him, flanked by her septa and one of her mother's ladies, her back straight in the saddle, her auburn hair catching what little light the iron sky is willing to give. She does not look back. She is performing composure, and she is performing it well, and Jon respects this without quite knowing that he does. It is on the second day that the column stretches thin along a road between bare hills, and the septa falls into conversation with one of the Queen's ladies, and the small gap between riders widens just enough, and Sansa draws back half a length without appearing to do it deliberately. She asks him, without looking at him directly, whether he has ever been south of the neck. He tells her no. He asks if she has. She says no, and then she says something he does not expect. She says she is afraid of the heat, that she has always imagined the South as a place where everything is too bright and too loud, and there is no stone old enough to feel permanent. Jon looks at her then. She is still looking forward, chin level, expression composed. But the words were honest. He can hear the difference between the words a person performs and the words a person actually means, and those were real. He says carefully that he expects they will find ways to make it bearable. She glances at him then, brief, assessing, the look of someone recalibrating a prior calculation. King's Landing announces itself before it is seen. The smell arrives first, salt and awful and smoke and something sweeter underneath. The rot of too many lives lived in too close a proximity. A city exhaling itself onto the wind. Then the noise, which is not a single sound, but a layering of sounds, each on top of the last until they become a pressure rather than a collection. Then the walls themselves, enormous and indifferent, throwing back the afternoon heat in long waves. Jon rides in near the back of the column and says nothing. He has no words for it yet. He does not try to find them. What he finds instead is that King's Landing watches everything and remembers nothing. It is a city built for spectacle and bored by it simultaneously, and the arrival of a king returning from the north barely ripples the surface of its attention. Vendors do not stop selling. Children do not stop running. The court, when it assembles to receive the royal party, assembles with the precise enthusiasm of people performing the emotion of enthusiasm rather than possessing it. Jon notices this. He files it. Joffrey notices Jon almost immediately, which is to say that Joffrey locates something he can use and approaches it. The boy is 12, and already constructed entirely from surface, all guilt and edge, and the particular cruelty of someone who has never once been made to sit with a consequence. He looks at Jon the way someone looks at an object placed in the wrong room, and his first words are not words so much as a verdict delivered in the form of a question. He asks, loudly enough to be heard by the knights standing nearby, whether bastards are permitted to sit at the high table, or whether special arrangements must be made, like for dogs. Jon does not flinch. This is the most important thing. He does not flinch, and he does not answer immediately, and the pause itself is a kind of answer. He says, evenly, that he could not speak to the customs of the South. He says it with a courtesy so exact, it contains within it no warmth whatsoever. Joffrey does not have the political literacy to identify what he has just encountered, but he senses the shape of it, and he moves away. Cersei watches this from across the room. Cersei watches everything. She has known about the betrothal since Robert's letter reached Casterly Rock, and her response to it has followed a familiar architecture. First, the spike of fury, then the cold compression of that fury into something more useful, more precise. A bastard. Robert is binding a bastard into the Stark line, which means Robert is binding a bastard into proximity with her children, with her court, with the careful structure she has spent years constructing around herself. She looks at Jon Snow and performs the calculation with the efficiency of long practice. He is northern, which means loyal to a fault if that loyalty is properly directed. He is young, which means malleable or might be. He is baseborn, which means vulnerable to the right application of pressure. She does not need to destroy him immediately. She needs to understand the geometry of him first, and then determine where to apply the lever. She does not approach him that night. She watches, and she waits, and she begins. Sansa, standing near the far end of the Great Hall, is aware of being watched by someone else entirely. The woman is old, ancient in the particular way of people who have survived everything and retained their amusement about it. And she is watching Sansa with an expression that resembles evaluation, the way a blade resembles a tool. Lady Olenna Tyrell has arrived in King's Landing with her granddaughter and a private agenda she keeps more carefully than most men keep their gold, and she has taken an interest in the girl from Winterfell that is not accidental. She approaches Sansa with her granddaughter at her side, and Margaery smiles with a warmth that is entirely genuine and therefore more dangerous than if it were not, because genuine warmth is harder to see around. Olenna asks Sansa a question about Winterfell, about the winters, about the cold, about what a girl does when there is nothing to do for 6 months but sit inside stone walls and think. It seems like small conversation. It is not small conversation. It is an audition, and Sansa, who has spent her whole life preparing for court without knowing she was preparing for anything, understands this in some unexamined part of herself and answers carefully, watching the old woman's face the way she might watch a fire to gauge the wind. Olenna nods once, almost imperceptibly, and something settles in her expression. She says that Sansa will do very well here if she remembers to say less than she knows. Margaery touches Sansa's arm briefly as they move away, the way someone marks a page to return to. Ned Stark does not sleep well his first night as Hand of the King. The chair sits in his solar like an accusation. He opens the Crown's accounts before the candle has burned a quarter down, and the numbers look back at him with the flat neutrality of facts that do not care what they mean to the person reading them. The The crown owes more than it can repay. Not eventually. Now. The mechanisms of that debt, the names, the interest, the years of accumulated convenience, point in a direction he does not like, toward a family with golden hair and long patience. He does not go to Jon that night, but in the morning, when the castle has settled into its routines and the corridors are predictable. He finds his nephew in the yard and speaks quietly of what he has found. Not all of it, but enough. He says there are things worth watching. He says the Queen's household, the people who move in and out of her rooms, the patterns of who speaks to whom, these are things he cannot observe himself without being observed in return. He does not ask Jon directly. He does not finish the thought. Jon looks at him for a moment, and then looks toward the window that faces the Tower of the Hand, where the Queen's apartments lie 3 floors above. He says he has already been watching. The debt lives in the numbers, and the numbers do not lie. But the debt is only the beginning of what Ned carries now, because beneath the ledgers, beneath the columns of gold, borrowed and interest owed, and loans extended, with the particular generosity of those who expect repayment in currencies other than coin, there is a second truth, a more dangerous one. He has looked at Joffrey. He has looked at Cersei. He has looked at the histories of Lannister marriages, at the particular shade of gold that runs through that bloodline like a signature, and he understands what he is looking at. The Crown Prince is not Robert's son. What this means for the realm is a question that unfolds in every direction at once. Succession destabilized, a queen's treachery exposed, a king's legacy unmade. What it means for Jon is something Ned has not yet been able to finish thinking through, because to follow that thought to its end is to hold 2 enormous secrets simultaneously. And the weight of them together is something different than the weight of either alone. Jon does not know what Ned knows. He knows less than he thinks, and more than he realizes. He has been watching, as he told Ned that morning, with the quiet competence of someone who learned surveillance, not from instruction, but from survival, from years of reading rooms in which he was always the least certain of his welcome. What he has gathered from watching is not yet a full picture. It is pieces, impressions. The way certain guards straighten when the Queen passes and relax when she does not. The way servants move differently through her wing of the Red Keep, faster, less willing to pause, as if the air there carries a pressure they prefer not to linger in. He has been building something from these observations without quite naming what he is building. Then he hears the guards. 2 Lannister men in a corridor off the Great Hall, the hour early enough that the castle's formal rhythms have not yet fully reasserted themselves. They are not speaking carefully because they do not believe they need to. The bastard's convenient elevation, one says, and the other makes a sound that is not quite a laugh, something shorter and more contemptuous than that. The words themselves are not extraordinary. It is what surrounds them, the certainty of it, the ease, the sense that this is not a new conversation, but a familiar one that has been had before in this tone, that lands differently than any threat delivered with deliberate intention might. Deliberate threats acknowledge the power of the person being threatened. This does not. This speaks of Jon as a piece being moved by someone else's hand, a convenience, an elevation, arranged not because of what he is, but because of what his removal would accomplish when the time came. Jon does not confront the guards. He moves past them with the unhurried gait of someone who heard nothing, and when he is out of the corridor, He goes to find Ned. Ned listens without expression. He sits in the solar that has become his thinking room, the window behind him casting the particular flat light of an overcast morning across his desk. And he lets Jon speak. And when Jon is finished, he does not offer reassurance. He offers something more useful, which is honesty at the edge of what he can share. He says that Jon has powerful enemies. He says this as a matter of established fact, not as a warning to be alarmed by, but as a condition to be calculated around. He says that the betrothal to Sansa has changed the shape of things in this court, shifted certain arrangements that certain people preferred to keep in place, and that those people are now looking for the most efficient way to unmake what Robert has made. He does not say who. He does not say how much he knows of the Queen's involvement. He does not say anything about the ledgers or what lives beneath the ledgers. Jon holds this. He turns it over the way he turns over most things, not with panic, not with the performance of steadiness that would itself betray fear, but with the particular quiet of someone who has been measuring the distance between himself and safety for most of his life and has simply become very accurate at the calculation. He asks Ned whether Sansa knows, whether she understands what kind of current she is inside, and Ned, for a moment, says nothing. Meanwhile, in a room the two of them cannot see, a conversation is already concluding. Cersei does not offer things carelessly. She offers them once, precisely, to the person most capable of using them. Peter Baelish accepts the offer with a smile that suggests he had been expecting it, had perhaps arranged the conditions under which it would be made. Harrenhal is a ruin, yes, but it is a title, and titles in this city are doors. He asks only one clarifying question about the woman Jon's mother is said to have been, whether there is anything specific she would like him to emphasize about the Dornish connection. Cersei's answer is brief and exact. Low birth, a kind of madness that ran in that family. And Ned, she adds, unable to refuse her. Baelish writes nothing down. He never does. The hunting party rides out on a morning that feels ordinary, which is itself a kind of warning. The sky is pale and wide over the King's Road, and the dogs run loose through the undergrowth in that eager, disordered way that suggests the day has not yet decided what it intends to become. Jon rides near the rear of the column, which is where a man of his standing is expected to ride, and he watches the party from that position with the careful attention of someone who has learned that the rear of any formation offers the clearest view of everything happening at the front. Robert is already drinking when they reach the first tree line. This is not unusual. Robert drinks the way other men breathe, continuously, without particular awareness of doing it, as though the wine were simply the medium through which he moved through the world. What Jon notices, and files away without yet knowing what shelf to place it on, is the servant who brings the king's cup, not one of the usual men. A young man, clean-faced, with the particular deference of someone answering to a household that prizes discretion above all else. The livery is subtle, but Jon has spent enough time in the Red Keep to recognize the colors that Cersei's people favor, the small choices of dress that mark affiliation, the way a heraldic device marks a shield. He says nothing. He has nothing yet worth saying. The boar comes from a direction no one anticipated, which is the only direction a boar ever comes from. What follows is not complicated in its mechanics. A man too slowed by wine to move with the speed the moment requires. A wound that goes deeper than it might have. blood that will not stop behaving the way it should. Robert is carried back to the city with the particular gravity that descends on a hunting party when it understands that it is no longer a hunting party. Jon rides the return journey in silence, the image of that servant and that cup turning slowly in the back of his mind, like a wheel that has not yet found the machinery it belongs to. Robert dies the way men of his kind tend to die, loudly at first, then very quietly. But before the quiet comes, there is a summons. Jon is brought to the king's chambers alongside Ned, and Robert, propped against pillows that seem insufficient to the task of holding him upright, looks at both of them with eyes that are still sharp, even as everything beneath them gives way. He does not make a speech. He does not have the breath for it. What he has instead is a document, already signed, already witnessed, pressed into the hands of the man standing nearest to him, which is Ned. The betrothal decree, Jon and Sansa. His final act as king, rendered in ink before the ink could be rendered meaningless by his dying. Robert says that he trusts Ned's blood. He does not say that Jon is Stark blood or Baratheon blood or any particular blood. He says Ned's blood, which is its own kind of exactness. He looks at Jon directly when he says it, and his expression carries something that is not quite apology and not quite pride, but occupies the territory between them. Jon does not speak. He does not trust himself to speak. Something moves through him that he has no name for, a recognition that this man, for all his vastness and disorder, and the particular damage he spread through everything he touched, has looked at him and seen something worth protecting, has chosen in the last minutes available to him to use whatever authority remained to him to draw a line around Jon's future and call it legitimate. He does not finish thinking through what this means. He does not need to. He simply stands and bears witness, which is all that has been asked of him. Robert dies before the afternoon is finished. Joffrey is proclaimed king with a speed that suggests the proclamation had been prepared in advance, which it had. The court assembles with that particular efficiency that courts display when power is changing hands and everyone is simultaneously calculating their position. Ned moves to challenge the succession with the evidence he has gathered, with the truth he has spent weeks building the architecture to support. The truth does not help him. Truth in this city is a currency that requires the backing of swords to hold its value, and Ned's swords are not where he believed them to be. Littlefinger's clarifying question, asked in that candlelit room days before, has already done its work. Ned is arrested in the throne room, while the throne watches and says nothing, as thrones do. Jon hears about it secondhand, from a page who delivers the information in the rushed, breathless way of someone who has been running. He stands very still when he hears it. Sansa is somewhere in this castle. The document Robert signed is somewhere in this castle, and every person who was protecting them both has just been removed from the board in a single move. Jon's hand finds the wall beside him, not for support exactly, but for the simple grounding fact of stone beneath his fingers, solid and indifferent, while he begins to calculate what comes next. The stone is still beneath his fingers when the second piece of information arrives, not from a page this time, but from a guardsman at the corridor's far end who speaks low and fast with the practiced economy of a man repeating something he does not fully understand. Joffrey has convened the small council. Joffrey has spoken from the high seat, as though he has always belonged there, and Joffrey, with Cersei standing precisely one step behind him, close enough to prompt, distant enough to deny, has declared that the betrothal arranged by his father is void. The reasoning is elegant in its cruelty. A bastard, Joffrey announces, cannot hold a royal ward's status without the living king's continued endorsement. Robert Baratheon is dead. The endorsement dies with him. The document ceases to mean anything. Jon's hand presses harder against the stone. This is how power works when it stops pretending. It does not argue its case. It declares, and the declaration is the argument, and the argument is the sword behind it, and the sword is the loyalty of the men holding it. And the loyalty has already been purchased, long before this morning, long before any of this. Cersei has not improvised this. She has revealed it. There is a difference, and Jon understands it in the corridor, with his hand flat against cold stone. Understands it the way a man understands the depth of a wound only after the blade is already out. Joffrey intends to marry Sansa himself. That is the second part of the declaration, delivered with the particular confidence of someone who has never encountered a consequence. She becomes his, properly and publicly, a Lannister prize dressed in the language of Baratheon succession, a hostage with a wedding date attached. The trap does not merely close, it locks. What Joffrey does not account for, what Cersei perhaps underestimates in her own calculations, is that Sansa has been educated in the weeks between her arrival and this moment by someone who understands that rooms like the ones Sansa now inhabits are only dangerous if you fail to move correctly within them. Margaery Tyrell had offered lessons in the language of courts, and Sansa, who has always been a careful student, has learned. She does not weep when the news reaches her apartments. She sits with her hands folded and her face arranged into the precise expression of a girl who is frightened but compliant, which is exactly what the women watching her expect to see, and therefore exactly what she shows them. Underneath that stillness, she is thinking. She identifies a servant, a young woman, Tyrell in her quiet allegiances, who moves through the castle with the invisibility that certain people wear like armor. A message passes. It is not long. It does not need to be. The message tells Jon that she is unharmed. The message tells him not to act on feeling. She does not finish several thoughts within it. She does not need to. Jon will understand what the spaces mean. She is telling him to be something other than what he is most instinctively, most dangerously. She is telling him not to be a Stark. He reads it standing in a narrow antechamber with the sound of boots on stone somewhere above him, and the light falling gray and thin through a single high window. His first impulse takes him 3 full steps toward the corridor before he stops himself, physically stops himself, the impulse still moving through his legs, while his mind catches up to what she has said. She is unharmed. For now, those 2 words sit next to each other like 2 sides of a door, one offering relief, the other offering nothing at all. He turns, and Sir Barristan Selmy is there. The old knight has not been dismissed yet. That time is coming. Jon will learn later that Cersei intends it, that she has never trusted this particular loyalty, that old honor makes young queens nervous. But it has not come yet, and Barristan Selmy is still standing in the corridors of the Red Keep, wearing the white cloak that means everything and increasingly protects nothing. He looks at Jon the way a man looks at a fire that has not yet decided which direction it will take. There is sympathy in it, real and quietly kept. the kind that does not announce itself. He speaks, not loudly. The words are measured and specific, chosen the way a former soldier chooses ground. He tells Jon that he has seen this kind of fury before, that he has watched it ruin better men than either of them will ever be, and that the throne room is exactly where someone like Joffrey wants someone like Jon to appear right now. He does not say that Jon is a boy. He says instead, "Think like a commander." The distinction is deliberate. Jon hears it. Then Barristan says something else. He says there are allies still within the city, people whose interests have not yet been fully committed to the new arrangement, people who are watching and waiting for someone to show them a direction worth moving toward. He knows how to reach them. Jon looks at him steadily. He asks how much time they have. Barristan's expression answers before his voice does. The meeting with Varys does not happen in daylight. It does not happen in any room that appears on a Castellan's map. It happens in a corridor that smells of old tallow and standing water, 2 levels beneath a part of the Red Keep that most of its inhabitants have never had cause to visit. And it happens because Barristan knows exactly which stone to press and exactly how long to wait before the silence is answered. Varys arrives without the affect he wears in council chambers. The soft hands are the same. The powdered face is the same. But the performance is stripped back, the way a merchant strips back the stall cloth after the market closes. And what is left beneath it is something considerably more difficult to read. He looks at Jon with the particular attention of a man who has been looking at him for some time already, and is simply no longer required to pretend otherwise. What if the most dangerous man in a city is not the one who holds the sword, but the one who has been quietly deciding whose hand it should eventually fall into? What if the information Varys carries into this corridor is not offered freely, but calibrated, measured in grains, released in sequence, each disclosure designed to create a specific weight of obligation in the person receiving it? He tells Jon that his birth is not a simple matter. He does not say more than that. Not yet. He says the words with the precision of a physician describing a wound that has not yet been properly examined, that the full accounting of it would require time neither of them currently possesses, but that certain people in certain positions have known for longer than Jon would find comfortable that the name Snow is not the whole of what he carries. Jon goes very still, the kind of still that is not calm. Varys watches it and does not flinch. He says that keeping Jon alive serves the realm. He says this not as flattery. He says it as a calculation stated plainly. He says there are long games being played at distances that the current occupant of the throne cannot even perceive, and that Jon, whether he chooses it or not, has become a piece with particular value on a board that extends well beyond the Red Keep's walls. Jon asks him why he is being told this now. Varys answers that now is when Jon is most likely to do something irreversible, and irreversible things have a way of foreclosing possibilities that have not yet been fully explored. He does not finish the thought. He does not need to. Jon leaves that corridor with more questions than certainties. This is, in its own way, exactly what Varys intended. Far to the north, the ravens have already done their work. The words they carried arrived cold and precise and stripped of comfort. Ned Stark under arrest, the betrothal dissolved by royal decree, the Lannister hand now firmly at the throat of every arrangement that had been made in good faith at Winterfell. Robb reads the message in the Great Hall with his mother beside him, and the Lords of the North, watching his face for what it will become. He calls the banners. He does this with deliberateness, not fury, though the fury is present, held back the way a river is held behind a good mill dam. The pressure real, the release controlled. His stated cause is specific: the liberation of his father, the return of his sister, the redress of wrongs committed against the Warden of the North and his household. He does not reach for the language of thrones. He does not have to. Every man in that hall knows the weight of what has been done, and every man in that hall is watching to see whether Robb Stark has the steadiness to carry it without letting it carry him. This restraint is not weakness. It is something more strategically valuable than boldness. Lords who might hesitate before a naked grab for power find themselves with no moral obstacle to placing a hand on a sword in defense of a father and sister held unjustly. Robb moves south with their full commitment rather than their reluctant participation. The distinction will matter before this is finished. In King's Landing, Sansa wakes early and says very little and watches everything. Joffrey's cruelties arrive with the casual frequency of weather, unpredictable in their specific form, entirely predictable in their pattern. And she endures them with a composure that is not submission. It is data collection. She has begun to understand which handmaidens carry information upward and which carry it sideways. She has begun to understand which servants notice when the queen's mood changes and which ones notice when the guard rotations shift. She tends these small relationships with the care of someone planting things in difficult soil, knowing the season for harvest is not yet visible on the horizon, but is coming regardless. It is into this quiet architecture of survival that Tyrion Lannister arrives, road-worn and sharply observant, his eyes moving across the yard with the habitual assessment of a man who expects to find the situation worse than reported and is rarely disappointed. He finds Sansa in the yard, standing at a careful distance from two knights whose body language communicates something she's already learned to read. He watches her. He reads what she has built around herself, and the legal question that has been troubling him since the King's Road, the question of Jon's ward status, of what the betrothal's dissolution actually means under the realm's law, sharpens suddenly into something that feels less like an academic curiosity and considerably more like a lever. He turns it over in his mind as he walks through the gates. He is still turning it when he passes Cersei's attendants in the corridor and gives them the smile that means absolutely nothing, and everything he is actually thinking remains exactly where he keeps all the things worth keeping. Somewhere no one currently living in this castle has been given access to. The cell beneath the Red Keep carries the particular cold of stone that has never known sunlight, a cold that is less a temperature than a quality, as though the darkness itself has weight, and the weight presses inward from all sides. Ned Stark sits within it the way a man sits when he has already made his accounting with the world and found the numbers, however painful, honest. He does not pace. He does not rage. He waits, because waiting is the last discipline left to him, and Eddard Stark has always understood discipline as a form of love. When Varys comes, he comes quietly. He always comes quietly. The man moves through the world like a rumor moves through a castle, present before anyone noticed the arrival, already shaping events before anyone thought to close the doors. He settles across from Ned with the particular stillness of a man who has learned that stillness communicates more than gesture. and he watches, and he says nothing for a long moment, and that nothing is deliberate. Ned speaks first. He does not waste the moment on pleasantries. There's a thing he has carried for 17 years, a thing wrapped so carefully inside silence and loyalty and love that it has almost become part of his own bone. And now he takes it out with the care of a man handling something that could burn the world. He tells Varys about Lyanna, about the Tower of Joy and what he found there, about the promise extracted from him by a dying woman whose eyes were Arya's eyes and whose love had unmade a kingdom. He tells Varys that Jon Snow is not his bastard. He tells him whose blood Jon carries. He does not speak the name Rhaegar with sentiment or grief, only with the precision of a man giving testimony, because precision is what the moment demands. Varys listens. His expression does not change because he has long since mastered the art of receiving information without revealing whether it is new. When Ned finishes, the silence returns, but it is a different silence than before. It has mass now. It has direction. What Ned asks for is not the throne. It is not rescue. It is simply that the information be used for Jon's protection rather than his destruction, that the secret serve the living rather than the ambitions of the powerful. He trusts Varys with the same reluctant calculation he would apply to any dangerous tool, not because he believes the man is good, but because he believes the man is consistent. And what Varys has always claimed to want is a realm that does not burn. A realm that does not burn requires Jon Snow alive. Varys carries the weight of that confession down corridors that only he fully maps, through passages the castle's architects chose to forget, into a chamber where Jon waits without knowing why he has been summoned or by whom. Jon stands the way young men stand when they are trying to appear unafraid and are succeeding at roughly half of it. He is dressed without ceremony. He has come because the message suggested his father's life might depend on his coming, and Jon Snow has never needed more reason than that. What Varys tells him is precise and without decoration. He does not soften the edges. He gives Jon the shape of the truth, the way a blade gives a shape to air, cleanly, completely, leaving nothing ambiguous about where the cut has been made. Jon does not speak for a long time after. The thing that has been his entire foundation, the bastard identity, the wondering about his mother, the particular loneliness of being almost a Stark, but never fully, shifts beneath him with a grinding so fundamental that for a moment there is nothing to stand on. He is not Ned's. The words rearrange themselves and refuse to settle into meaning. He is Lyanna's. He is the son of a woman who chose love with the force of catastrophe and did not survive it. He is the blood of a dynasty his entire world was built on the bones of defeating. He thinks of Sansa. He cannot help it. He thinks of the betrothal, of Robert's hand arranging what Robert never understood he was arranging, of a Stark girl promised to a Targaryen heir in a hall full of people who would have drawn steel at the syllables. The irony does not comfort him. It lands like a stone in still water and spreads outward in circles that will touch every shore. The news of Ned's execution arrives the way terrible news always arrives, too soon, too plainly, from a mouth that has the decency to be brief. Jon receives it in the same chamber where his world already lies in pieces, and he stands perfectly still, and the grief moves through him like weather moves through a valley, vast and total and indifferent to anything so small as readiness. When he speaks again, his voice is changed, not broken, changed. He looks at Varys and says that he will not reach for the throne. He says it once. He does not say it is because he lacks ambition. He says it is because the North is not finished yet, and Sansa is not safe, and the Lannisters are not done collecting what they believe they are owed. Varys watches him with the careful attention of a man reassessing a piece he thought he understood, and what he sees in Jon's face is something rarer and more dangerous than ambition. It is grief that has learned the grammar of intention. It is love wearing the mask of strategy, quietly and with great patience taking aim. In the corridor above them, somewhere in the warm-lit architecture of power, Tyrion Lannister is still turning his legal question over in his mind, and the lever he has found is beginning to feel less like a curiosity and more like a door. And he is starting, with a methodical intelligence that defines everything he does, to wonder what lies on the other side of it. The night Jon rides north, the wind comes down off the hills like something that has been waiting. Sir Barristan rides beside him without speaking for the first long hour, his white cloak traded for plain wool, his face arranged into the careful blankness of a man who has made a decision and has no further interest in revisiting it. The road unravels ahead of them in the dark. Behind them, King's Landing diminishes into a smear of orange light on the low horizon, and Jon does not look back at it. He carries the betrothal document folded against his chest, beneath his riding leathers, close enough that he can feel its edges when he breathes. He carries other things that have no physical weight and are heavier for it. What if the document alone were enough to change a war? What if the ink on a single piece of parchment, signed in a dead king's hand, possessed the power to redraw every line of conflict, spreading south and east and west across the realm like fractures in stone? It is not enough on its own. Jon understands this with the cold precision of someone who has spent weeks inside the machinery of political violence and watched how quickly law dissolves when power decides it is inconvenient. But it is something. It is the difference between a claim and a rumor, between a cause and a grievance, and when he finally rides into Robb's camp 2 nights later through a thin gray dawn, he carries both. Robb meets him outside the command tent. He does not embrace him immediately. He looks at him the way you look at someone you have been afraid is dead, taking inventory, reassuring yourself with evidence. Then the embrace comes, hard and brief, the way northern men hold grief when they are not ready to release it. Inside the tent, with the candles burning low and the maps spread across the table like the bones of a strategy still being assembled, Jon tells him everything. The lineage, the words Ser Barristan spoke beneath the keep. He does not dress it. He does not soften the architecture of it. He lays it out the way you lay out a wound that needs to be seen clearly before it can be treated. Robb is silent for a long time, long enough that the candles shift and gutter, long enough that outside someone calls a watch change and boots move across the frozen ground, and the camp breathes its slow nocturnal breath around them. What if that silence breaks something between them? It does not. Robb looks at the table, not at Jon, and when he finally speaks, his voice is quieter than Jon expects. He says that it changes nothing that needs changing. He says it without ceremony, which is how Northerners say things they mean absolutely. Jon does not finish the sentence that rises in him. He does not need to. The betrothal document Robb studies more carefully, turning it in his hands, reading the signatures twice. Here is the lever Jon has carried south and north and through the teeth of everything the capital could offer as obstacle. Here is Robert Baratheon's will, legible and sealed, predating every Lannister maneuver that has followed. Robb sets it down with the particular deliberateness of someone identifying where on the board a critical piece now stands. The battle at the Whispering Wood is swift in the way that surgical things are swift. Jon commands the eastern flank with a steadiness that the northern lords notice. Not because he is reckless, but because he is not. He reads the ground the way Ser Barristan once read a hall full of courtiers, understanding which angles are covered and which are exposed, which men are anchoring their positions, and which are performing the motion of holding without the substance. When the Lannister cavalry drives into the trees, they find something that has already adjusted to receive them. Jaime Lannister is taken before the moon fully clears the canopy, his golden armor gone dark with shadow and mud, his sword hand empty. Robb stands over him in the aftermath with the expression of someone who has been handed a tool of extraordinary precision and is calculating exactly where to apply it. Jaime's freedom, he says quietly, is not a matter of ransom. It is a matter of Sansa. He says it simply. He says it in a way that leaves Jaime no ambiguity about whether Robb Stark is someone who can be negotiated away from this position. In King's Landing, the calculation is different, but arrives at a related shore. Tyrion Lannister reads the Raven's message in the small hours before anyone else in the castle has found their way to wakefulness. Jaime captured. Terms pending. He sets the letter down and sits with his wine untouched. He has been building something in the architecture of this court, quietly, without declaring it, finding the spaces where pressure can be applied with minimal force for maximum displacement. Sansa's improved rooms, her better treatment. The whisper carefully placed that a Stark daughter treated well is a negotiating position, while one treated badly is a provocation. He picks up his wine now. He is already drafting in his mind. The letter he sends will not bear his name. It will find Robb's camp through channels that have nothing to do with official ravens, and it will arrive in the hand of someone who will recognize immediately that it comes from a Lannister who has decided, with characteristic self-interest, wrapped around something that might, if you pressed him, be called principle, that this war is too expensive for everyone still standing in it. He does not seal it yet. He turns it over once more, reading what he has written, looking for the places where his own intelligence has perhaps outrun his caution. Outside, dawn is beginning to feel its way along the walls of the Red Keep, and somewhere in the eastern corridor, Varys is already moving. The letter arrives at Robb's camp 11 days later, carried by a wine merchant from Maidenpool who does not know what he is carrying and has been paid enough not to ask. Robb reads it twice. Then he passes it to his mother, who reads it once, slowly, with the expression of someone recognizing a trap by its shape before they have identified its mechanism. She sets it down on the table between them. Neither speaks for a long moment. Then Catelyn says that Tyrion Lannister is the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms, not because he is cruel, but because he is honest enough about his own self-interest to occasionally tell the truth. The exchange is arranged for a location that belongs to no one in particular, a crossroads sept 3 miles east of the Trident, where the road splits between the Riverlands and the capital. Neutral ground, technically. Sacred ground, technically. Tyrion chooses it because desecrating a sept would cost anyone who attempted it more political currency than the act was worth. and because it is narrow enough that neither side can position cavalry effectively. He has thought about this carefully. He has thought about most things carefully for most of his life, it being the primary tool available to him. Jaime comes south in chains that are, by now, more ceremonial than structural. He walks with the contained stillness of a man who has learned not to spend energy on conditions he cannot alter. When he sees Tyrion across the sept's small forecourt, something moves briefly across his face. Not sentiment exactly, but the recognition of something that has been preserved when it might easily have been lost. He does not say anything, neither does Tyrion. The silence between brothers holds more than the available words could. Sansa walks out through the sept's low wooden door into thin morning light, and the world becomes briefly very simple. She is thinner than she was. She holds herself differently, with a careful precision that was not there before, as though she has learned to move through space in ways that attract less attention. She sees the Stark banners and does not run toward them. She walks steadily, which is its own kind of courage. Robb meets her at the midpoint of the courtyard and says her name once, quietly, and she steps into the embrace of it like stepping out of cold water into warm. The terms are deliberately incomplete. The question of legitimate succession. Who holds the Iron Throne? What claim supersedes what other claim, where the Stark-Targaryen alliance positions itself relative to the crown's legal continuity, is left formally unresolved, deferred to a great council to be convened at a time and location, to be determined by parties who have not yet agreed on which parties have the authority to determine such things. It is, by any clean political measure, an unsatisfying compromise. It is also the only agreement that does not require someone to lose catastrophically in order for someone else to survive. Tyrion understands this. He has built his entire career on the architecture of incomplete victories. Stannis Baratheon's proclamation reaches the assembled lords 3 days after the exchange concludes, moving faster than anyone anticipated through channels that Stannis has never bothered to conceal, because Stannis has never bothered with concealment as a strategy. He states the lineage of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen plainly without embellishment, in the flat declarative style of a man who believes that truth requires no decoration. He names Cersei Lannister. He names Jaime. He provides the accounting with the thoroughness of someone who has been keeping records for this purpose for longer than most people suspected. The effect on noble opinion is not immediate, but it is inexorable. Lords who have been holding their positions with the careful neutrality of men watching a fire to see which way the wind will push it begin, quietly, to step northward. The Lannister position does not collapse, it contracts. There is a difference, and the difference matters, but the trajectory is legible to anyone reading the movement of ravens. The road north from River Run takes 4 days in good weather, and the weather is adequate. Jon rides beside Sansa on the second afternoon, when the column has settled into its traveling rhythm, and conversation becomes possible without being observed too closely. She asks him, without preamble, what he wants, by which she means separately from what has been arranged for him. It is a question that no one has thought to ask him in the precise way she asks it, and he sits with it for a moment before answering. He tells her that he wants to build something that lasts. He tells her that he has spent enough of his life uncertain of where he stands to know that certainty, when it arrives, is not something to refuse out of pride. He does not tell her that he has been watching her since River Run. the way she carries herself now, what it has cost her, and what it has not taken. He does not finish the sentence. She finishes it for him. She says that if anyone had asked her, she would have chosen this. Jon looks at the road ahead for a moment. Then he tells her that he would have asked. Ahead of them, Robb calls back something about the pace, and the column moves on. And between them, the conversation closes quietly around what has just been decided, which is not nothing, and is not yet everything, and is perhaps exactly the right size for the road they are still traveling. The great hall at Riverrun fills slowly, the way all consequential rooms fill, with men who arrive early to take measure of the space, and then spend the waiting hours measuring each other instead. Lords and their representatives come in from the River Road, from the Western Pass, from the long northern track still muddy with the last of the autumn rains. Banners are folded and stacked outside the doors as a gesture of neutrality, a small civility that costs nothing and signals everything. What is convened here is not a trial and not a coronation. It is something older and less certain than either, a council, a settling, an attempt by exhausted men to find a shape for what remains. Jon stands before them with the quiet composure of someone who has rehearsed nothing and prepared everything. Ser Barristan is present, white-haired and still, his presence itself a kind of testimony. A man whose life has been spent in proximity to the truth of succession, who has watched kings made and unmade, and who speaks now not from loyalty to any living claimant, but from the duty of accurate witness. The documents that Varys preserved move through careful hands. There is no drama in it. The lineage is simply what it is, and Jon presents it plainly without the performance that a lesser man might have wrapped around such a revelation. He is Aegon Targaryen, or near enough that the distinction barely matters. He does not want the Iron Throne. He says this before anyone can ask, and the room exhales without quite meaning to. What he proposes instead is careful and considered. The North will be recognized as an independent kingdom, self-governing, bound by no southern succession claim. The question of who sits in King's Landing is a wound the realm is not yet ready to close, and Jon says as much. That a healing which is forced too quickly does not hold, that the succession can be addressed when the realm has found its footing again. That stability now is worth more than resolution prematurely imposed. The lords of the southern houses listen with the careful attention of men deciding whether to be relieved or offended, and most of them, in the end, settle on something close to relief. They are tired. The wars have cost them what wars always cost. A settlement that asks them to wait is easier to accept than one that asks them to choose. The council does not produce a peace so much as it produces a pause, and perhaps that is enough. The North leaves Riverrun with what it came for, and what it came for is simply to be let alone. The wedding at Winterfell happens in the way that honest things happen, without ceremony proportioned to its importance, without the guest lists and the banners and the seating arrangements that mark events more interested in being witnessed than in being real. Robb is there, and Arya, fidgeting in the cold with her hands tucked under her arms. Bran watches from his chair with the particular stillness he has developed, a stillness that seems to see more than ordinary watching allows. Rickon stands close to Robb as he always does now, slightly behind him, one hand occasionally finding the edge of his brother's sleeve. The surviving bannermen stand in the yard with their breath clouding in the gray morning air, and the godswood is quiet around them all, the red leaves fallen, and the heart tree pale and waiting. There's a moment just before the words are spoken when Sansa lifts the Stark cloak and places it around Jon's shoulders herself. It is not the tradition. The tradition moves in the other direction. Husband to wife, the sheltering gesture running from protection offered to protection received. What she does instead is something she has thought about without quite thinking about it. An instinct arrived at through weeks of watching Jon carry the weight of the North as though it belonged to him. Which, of course, it does. Which, of course, it always did. The laughter that moves through the small crowd is gentle and surprised and warm. Jon looks at her. He does not say anything. He does not need to. She straightens the cloak on his shoulders with both hands, the way you might straighten something you intend to keep. The words are spoken. The thing is done. Later, when the yard has emptied and the cold has deepened and the first snow of the season has begun to fall in the slow, deliberate way of snow that intends to stay, Jon and Sansa stand together on the battlements and watch it come down. The flakes are fine and steady, settling on the stone and the bare branches and the rooftops of the castle below, covering everything with the same patient impartiality that winter has always shown. It does not distinguish between the great and the small, between what has been fought for and what has simply endured. Jon thinks about Robert Baratheon, the large, careless hand that set this in motion, the arrangement made for politics and convenience and the king's own obscure satisfaction. He thinks about how little Robert intended and how much arrived anyway. The North is free. Ned's death was not the end of the thing Ned gave his life to protect. The long shadow that the Targaryens and the Baratheons cast across the world, across all of them, has finally lifted. Not with fire or proclamation, but with snow falling quietly on a northern yard, and two people standing in it who chose and were chosen and built something that will last because it was made of the right materials from the beginning. Not arrangement, not strategy, not the self-serving geometry of kings, but the slower and more durable work of simply being willing to stand in the cold together, watching the winter come in at home.